In the summer of 2008, life changed forever for the Escobedo family. Marisela Escobedo lived in Ciudad Juarez, in the Mexican state of Chihuahua, a city already infamous for violence, organized crime, and the unsolved disappearances of hundreds of women. Despite the city's dangerous reputation, Marisela remained devoted to her family. Her greatest joy was her daughter, 16-year-old Rubí Marisol Frayre Escobedo. Rubí was young, hopeful, and looking forward to her future. Like many teenagers, she dreamed of building a life of her own. She had been involved in an unstable relationship with a man named Sergio Rafael Barraza Bocanegra. According to people close to the family, the relationship was troubled and often marked by jealousy and controlling behavior. Marisela had concerns about Sergio, but she never imagined those fears would become reality. In August 2008, Rubí suddenly vanished. At first, family members searched desperately, believing she might have left after an argument or gone to stay with friends. Hours became days, days became weeks. No phone calls, no messages, no sightings. Marisela immediately contacted authorities, hoping police would launch an aggressive search. Instead, she encountered delays, indifference, and bureaucracy. Like many families of missing women in northern Mexico during that period, she quickly realized she would have to investigate on her own. She questioned neighbors. She visited hospitals. She spoke with anyone who might know where Rubí had gone. Again and again, one name surfaced: Sergio Barraza. Marisela became convinced Sergio knew exactly what had happened. As pressure mounted, investigators questioned him. Eventually, Sergio confessed. He admitted that he had killed Rubí following an argument. He described burning her body and scattering her remains in an attempt to eliminate evidence. Using information from his confession, investigators located burned bone fragments in an area outside Ciudad Juarez. Although forensic limitations made identification difficult, the discovery closely matched Sergio's account. For Marisela, the confession was heartbreaking, but she believed justice would now follow. She believed the nightmare was nearing its end. She was wrong. The case moved to trial before a panel of judges in Chihuahua. The prosecution presented Sergio's confession alongside evidence recovered during the investigation. Yet the judges ruled that the confession alone was insufficient because it had not been fully corroborated by the available forensic evidence under the legal standards then applied. Despite admitting to the murder and leading investigators to the location where remains were recovered, Sergio Barraza was acquitted and released. The decision stunned observers. For Marisela, it was almost impossible to comprehend. The man who had admitted killing her daughter walked free. The mother who had lost everything was left with nothing but unanswered questions. Many people would have accepted defeat. Marisela refused. She believed the justice system had failed not only Rubí but countless other victims whose families never received answers. Rather than retreat into grief, she transformed that grief into determination. She began gathering documents, studying court records, meeting journalists, speaking with activists, learning every detail of her daughter's case. She would become investigator, advocate, spokesperson, and relentless campaigner all at once. Her mission had changed. Finding Rubí was no longer possible. Bringing her killer to justice was now her life's purpose. By the end of 2008, Marisela Escobedo had suffered every parent's worst nightmare. Her teenage daughter Rubí had disappeared and was later confirmed murdered. The prime suspect confessed to the crime and directed investigators to the location where evidence was recovered. Yet, despite that confession, Sergio Barraza was acquitted due to insufficient corroborating forensic evidence under the court's interpretation of the law. For Marisela, the courtroom verdict marked the beginning, not the end of her fight. She refused to let her daughter's murder become another forgotten case. That decision would transform her from a grieving mother into one of Mexico's most recognizable human rights advocates. But her determination would also place her on a dangerous path toward confronting powerful failures within the justice system, one that would ultimately put her own life at risk. In the next part, the story follows Marisela as she tracks Sergio Barraza across Mexico, pressures authorities to reopen the case, and becomes the face of a nationwide movement demanding justice for victims of femicide. Following the discovery of Rubí Frayre's remains, investigators arrested her former boyfriend, Sergio Barraza. During questioning, he confessed to killing Rubí after an argument and led authorities to the location where he said he had disposed of her remains. To Marisela Escobedo, the confession seemed to guarantee justice. However, when the case went to trial, the judges ruled that the available forensic evidence did not sufficiently corroborate Sergio's confession under the legal standards applied at the time. In a decision that shocked the public, he was acquitted and released. Refusing to accept the verdict, Marisela launched a relentless campaign to expose what she saw as a profound failure of the justice system. She met with prosecutors, spoke to journalists, organized demonstrations, and demanded that higher courts review the case. Her persistence paid off. An appellate court overturned the acquittal, found Sergio Barraza guilty of Rubí's murder, and sentenced him to 50 years in prison. But by then, Sergio had disappeared. Having been released after the initial acquittal, he fled before authorities could arrest him again. Although Marisela had won the legal battle, the man convicted of murdering her daughter remained free. Determined not to let him escape justice, she began a nationwide campaign to track him down, setting the stage for an even more dangerous chapter in her fight. Most people would have walked away after losing faith in the courts. Marisela Escobedo did the opposite. The acquittal of Sergio Barraza became the beginning of a mission that consumed every part of her life. She was no longer fighting only for Rubí. She was fighting for every family that had been told there was nothing more the authorities could do. With a folder full of court documents under her arm, photographs of her daughter, and an unwavering determination, Marisela began traveling across Chihuahua and beyond, demanding that officials revisit the case. She spoke to reporters, she met with prosecutors, she attended public events wherever government officials appeared. Every opportunity became another chance to ask the same question: how could a man who confessed to murder be allowed to walk free? Her persistence soon attracted national attention. Across Mexico, people began hearing the name Marisela Escobedo. She was no longer just another grieving mother. She had become the public face of a justice system under intense scrutiny. As public pressure mounted, prosecutors appealed the acquittal. The case was reviewed by a higher court. After examining the evidence, the appellate judges reached a dramatically different conclusion. They ruled that the earlier decision had been legally flawed. The court overturned Sergio Barraza's acquittal. He was found guilty of Rubí Frayre's murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. For Marisela, it was the breakthrough she had fought so hard to achieve. But the victory came with a devastating complication. By the time the conviction was issued, Sergio Barraza was gone. After being released following his acquittal, he had fled before authorities could take him back into custody. The sentence existed only on paper. The convicted killer had vanished. Once again, Marisela found herself asking the authorities to act, and once again, she believed they were moving far too slowly. Marisela refused to wait. If law enforcement could not find Sergio Barraza, she would continue searching herself. She followed every lead she received. Friends, strangers, activists, and concerned citizens began contacting her with possible sightings. Some tips led nowhere. Others appeared promising before collapsing under closer examination. Still, she never stopped. She traveled from city to city. She visited government offices. She demanded meetings with officials responsible for locating fugitives. Every interview with the media carried the same message: my daughter deserves justice. Her determination inspired countless other families who had lost loved ones to violence. Many mothers of missing or murdered daughters saw themselves in Marisela. They knew the frustration of unanswered questions. They understood what it meant to fight institutions that seemed unwilling or unable to help. Gradually, Marisela became more than an advocate for her own family. She became a symbol of resistance against impunity. Marisela's campaign unfolded against a troubling backdrop. For years, Ciudad Juarez had drawn international attention because of the large number of women and girls who had disappeared or been murdered. Many of those crimes remained unsolved. Human rights organizations repeatedly criticized the failures of investigations and the lack of accountability for perpetrators. Families often felt abandoned, evidence was mishandled, investigations stalled, cases were forgotten. Marisela understood that Rubí's murder was not an isolated tragedy, it was part of a much larger crisis. During interviews, she argued that justice should not depend on a family's ability to pressure authorities. The system itself should protect victims. Her words resonated across Mexico. News outlets followed her campaign. Activists marched beside her. Human rights groups amplified her demands. She had transformed personal grief into a nationwide call for reform. As months passed, Marisela intensified her demonstrations. She organized peaceful protests outside government buildings. She carried large photographs of Rubí. She displayed banners demanding Sergio Barraza's arrest. Sometimes she stood alone. Other times, dozens of supporters joined her. She confronted officials directly, asking why a convicted murderer remained free despite a final court sentence. Television cameras frequently captured her determination. Her speeches were emotional but focused. She did not seek revenge, she sought accountability. Each appearance increased pressure on the authorities, but it also made Marisela more visible. Her face became recognizable throughout the country. Everyone knew who she was, including those connected to the man she was trying to bring to justice. As Marisela's profile grew, so did concerns for her safety. Friends and supporters worried that publicly challenging powerful criminal networks and relentlessly pursuing a convicted fugitive placed her in serious danger. Mexico's ongoing struggle with organized crime had created an environment in which threats against activists, journalists, and citizens seeking justice were becoming increasingly common. Yet Marisela showed little sign of retreating. She believed that remaining silent would only allow injustice to continue. If fear stopped her, then Rubí's killer would remain free, and countless other families might lose hope as well. She often said that she had already lost what mattered most. Nothing else could persuade her to stop. By late 2010, nearly 2 years had passed since Rubí's murder. Sergio Barraza was still a fugitive. Marisela decided to take her protest directly to the seat of political power in Chihuahua. She established a peaceful demonstration outside the Chihuahua government palace, where the state governor's offices were located. Day after day, she stood in the public square with photographs of Rubí and signs demanding action. She wanted government leaders to see her every time they entered or left the building. She believed they should not be allowed to ignore the families still waiting for justice. It was one of the most visible protests of her campaign. People passing through the square stopped to speak with her. Journalists continued covering her story. Supporters praised her courage. But few realized that these public demonstrations had placed her in extraordinary danger. As the days passed, Marisela remained exactly where she had promised to be, waiting, demanding answers, refusing to leave until justice was done. She could not have known that the place where she stood each day would soon become the scene of another tragedy, one that would shock Mexico and the world. Marisela Escobedo had accomplished what few ordinary citizens ever could. She had forced a failed murder case back into the courts. She had secured the conviction of the man responsible for her daughter's death. She had become the voice of thousands of families demanding accountability. Yet despite all of her efforts, the convicted killer remained free. Standing outside the Chihuahua government palace, Marisela believed her fight was nearing its final chapter. Instead, the greatest danger she had ever faced was already closing in. On the evening of December 16, 2010, Marisela Escobedo continued her peaceful protest outside the Chihuahua government palace, demanding the capture of Sergio Barraza. She had spent months urging authorities to enforce the conviction against the man who murdered her daughter, Rubí Frayre. As security cameras recorded the scene, a gunman approached Marisela in the public square. She attempted to run toward the entrance of the government building, hoping to find safety, but the attacker pursued her and shot her at close range. She died from her injuries shortly afterward. The killing occurred directly outside one of the state's most heavily guarded government buildings, shocking Mexico and drawing international condemnation. Footage of the attack spread widely, becoming a powerful symbol of the dangers faced by families seeking justice. Investigators later concluded that the murder had been ordered by members of the Los Zetas criminal organization, allegedly acting on behalf of Sergio Barraza. Although several suspects were identified over time, not everyone involved was brought to justice. Months later, in 2012, Sergio Barraza himself was killed during a confrontation with the Mexican military. His death meant he would never serve the 50-year prison sentence imposed for Rubí's murder. Marisela Escobedo began her journey as a grieving mother searching for answers after the murder of her teenage daughter. When the justice system failed her, she refused to accept silence. Her determination led to the overturning of an acquittal and the conviction of Rubí's confessed killer, but that legal victory came too late to prevent him from fleeing. Her relentless campaign transformed her into one of Mexico's most recognized advocates against impunity and gender-based violence. Even after her death, her story inspired renewed calls for reforms in the investigation of femicide, greater protection for victims' families, and stronger accountability within the justice system. Today, Marisela Escobedo is remembered not only for the tragedy she endured, but for the extraordinary courage she displayed in confronting a system she believed had failed countless families. Her story is a reminder that justice delayed can carry devastating consequences, and that the courage of one determined individual can expose failures that an entire nation can no longer ignore. If this story moved you, consider sharing it so that Marisela Escobedo's fight for justice and Rubí Frayre's memory continue to be remembered. Kindly turn your click to kindness by subscribing, like, and comment. Thank you for watching. If you found this documentary informative, consider subscribing for more carefully researched true crime stories based on verified facts, court records, and official investigations. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember that the most unsettling mysteries are often the ones hidden in plain sight.